Alrighty, hello, you guys. Welcome back to the channel. Happy Feminine Friday. Happy Friday, you guys. Welcome back. Thank you, those who are tuning in with us today. Now, getting right into it. After reacting to the Candace Owens and Victor Marks interview, I had to come back and react to the interview that, honestly, this one actually surprised me in a completely different way, though. Candace Owens was sitting down with Hunter Biden. And let's be honest, there's probably a few people in American politics that have more controversy surrounding them over the years than Hunter Biden. Whether you dislike him, whether you like him, whether you're left, whether you're right, whether you're independent, or somewhere in the middle, people have opinions about him. But what was most interesting to me during this interview wasn't even necessarily like the politics. Don't get me wrong, there's a few things that we will be going over. But honestly, this interview was pretty, I would say, like, it's transparent, surprisingly. Maybe. I don't know, you guys determine it. But it was pretty much about addiction, accountability, media culture, family, and the political extremes, of course, which we'll tune in and we'll go over. I'll give you guys all my thoughts and opinions on it. But I think there were a few moments in the interview that genuinely stood out to me in general. And I think people should be actually paying attention to instead of reacting like emotionally based off of their initial political views. So today we're going to break down some of the biggest moments during the interview, react to a few clips, and I'm going to give you guys my honest opinion, my honest thoughts throughout the video. So do watch the whole video in its entirety because we just get spicier and spicier and spicier as we go through. Now, before we get started, obviously just be mindful. These are my opinions. This is my reaction, my observations of what's actually happening in the interview. I'm not here to attack anybody. I'm not here to take sides. I'm not even here to convince anybody politically. I'm simply reacting to the interview itself and the conversations that stood out to me. So, with that being said, before we deep dive into this, do remember to subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications, do like the video, and do comment below if you guys already saw the Hunter Biden interview, because I'm interested to know you guys' thoughts and opinions on it. But without further ado, let's get into today's topic. Okay, so you guys know I came prepared with my timestamps. I'm gonna not try to make this as long as possible. I know I've been doing hours of just rambling on, it's like not reaction content. And I'll do my best to just, stick to the highlights, and of course, we're always sticking to the facts as best as we have them, based off what's shown, right? Based off what's shown, based off what we know, based off the information provided. So let's start with this. So obviously, Candace Owens has been very open about her political views, about the Biden administration, about Hunter Biden himself. And she kind of opens up the floor with explaining how this interview even came to be. I'm not going to show that to you guys, but I am going to explain it to you guys in a brief way because I think that there are other components in the interview that are more intriguing. So to make a long story short, Candace Owens was having some type of dinner or lunch or sit down with a fellow podcaster. That fellow podcaster asked her questions saying who would she like to interview, and she doesn't do a lot of interviews. She's said that she's like leaning away towards politics and given everything that happened with Charlie Kirk, but she did say that she would like to do an interview with Hunter Biden. He would be one of the people on her list, and lo and behold, it happened. She ended up having dinner. I believe they ended up having dinner together, the podcaster, her husband, and then Hunter Biden and his wife. I could get that wrong. Could have just been Hunter Biden and Candace Owens and their spouses, but that's what I got, right? The general gist. And then lo and behold, we are here reacting to the interview. So that's pretty much how it came about. They had like a prior discussion. She respectfully said that, this is not an interview to attack President Biden himself, because there's obviously a lot of controversy and stuff surrounding Hunter Biden. So she made it very clear in the beginning that she's just going to stick to the questions that she has specifically towards him and his story. And that's pretty much it. So Candace didn't waste any time getting into like the big controversy surrounding Hunter Biden. And honestly, I knew she was going to ask. The first question she asked, I knew she was going to ask, and I'm happy that she asked. And I think we all know she was going to ask. The infamous White House, and excuse my language, cocaine story. And for those who may not know, they're going to explain in the video. So I'm going to play it for you guys. But before we do, let's just lay out the groundwork for those who may not know. Hunter Biden has been very public about his addiction struggles in the past. So naturally, people are immediately going to assume that it belongs to him. And that was a big controversy around that time, that there was cocaine found in the White House. Hunter Biden used to be an addict. It's his. Now, what actually surprised me about this portion wasn't necessarily the question himself as much, but it was his response. So let's take a look.
But there's a lot to be said about you, and a lot that I guess hasn't been said about your journey. And I guess I want to start with just one question for the culture. The cocaine that was found at the White House, was it yours?
No, not only was it not mine. No, number one is thank you for having me here. And one of the reasons is to be able to answer these questions. You know, the one thing I am, after 6 years of this, I've been sober since June 1st of 2019, clean and sober. Verifiably so, by the way, and verifiably so by the Bureau of Probation, in which I was drug tested randomly for over the course of 2 years while I went through my trials and things like that. But beyond that is that, directly to your question, I wasn't even there. Not only there, but people have to understand is where that cocaine was found was, the visitor's entrance underneath that is where visitors come in and they come over from the old executive office building staff to go to the Oval or go to the chief of staff's office or to the offices in the West Wing. And it was found in a cubby in right outside of the Situation Room. Mm-hmm. And it's like no possibility, not even remotely, beyond the fact that I wasn't even there. Right. I mean, I spent probably, over the course of 4 years, maybe 25 days at the White House, like 25 nights, 30, if I'm being fair. And so it's just it was an easy, I'm an easy target, and understandably so.
Right.
I mean, I've been, I think, probably the most famous addict and famous person, through the grace of God, in recovery for 7 years, or close to 7 years, June 1st. So.
Yeah, I definitely thought you were on drugs while your father was in the White House. I don't know. Yeah. But I think it might have just also been the timing of the laptop coming out and then people just assuming that you were still on drugs. I don't know. That might have been why in our heads we thought that.
I think that it was that they purposely conflated. I wrote a book, which came out in April of 2021, in which I did something that very few people, I think, ever in that are kind of like similarly situated to me do. In which I was 100% frank about the fact that not only was I an addict, not only was I alcoholic. I don't really see the distinction between the two when they're both drugs, but I was a crack addict. Like I was a degenerate crack addict. I mean,
okay, let's pause there. His response kind of took me off guard. I'm gonna be very honest. His response was kind of funny but I respect it because instead of him getting like super defensive and like be like politically correct or polished, he decided to respond directly. He was like, I understand why people would think that. However, that was not the case. And to be fair, he was kind of like distinguishing the difference between being, I guess, a cokehead and a crackhead. I don't know. But nonetheless, whether people believe him or not, it honestly was a different level of transparency. Most public figures wouldn't even like admit to that publicly. And I think this is where people need to be a little bit like fair. Like some people, like after obviously like he got caught, he was like, all over the news for so long. So it's like, yeah, there's no hiding the fact that you were an addict. But at the end of the day, if you believe him, you believe him. If you don't, you don't. None of us truly know what the real is. But personally speaking, because of how openly he talks about his addiction and his substance abuse, and how he just like blatantly just said like, hey, I was a crack addict. Even when it makes him look bad, actually, I partially believe him. The only reason why I say partially and not fully is because obviously I would never really know if I'm not there. And is him saying like, hey, that wasn't mine, but he's not saying like, I've never done that in the White House. Obviously, if they found that in the White House, there's a few people, whether him or not, that felt comfortable enough to bring certain substances to the White House. So that obviously, thinking of like, I guess the security, I've never been to the White House before, but I think the average person would think like, how would that even happen? But I'm going to let him finish up real quick, and then I'll finish up with my general thoughts on this specific topic.
I've heard you call me a crackhead many times, and the truth of the matter is, I was a crackhead.
Yeah.
And I say that not to shock people, because it's really shocking. Crack cocaine carries such a stigma to it to begin with, but I say it because I think that there are so many people. I know there are so many people. I think that there's, at any given time, 30 million Americans that are either in active addiction or in recovery. There's not a single person that I know that hasn't been impacted by addiction at some level, in some form, personally, or with someone that is 1 degree of separation from them that they love.
Okay, no, I agree with that. But let's address things one by one. So first and foremost, I appreciate Candace for being very bold and asking that question and doing it for the culture, as she says. We love and appreciate that. Secondly, I do appreciate Hunter Biden's level of transparency. Now, if it's fully transparent, not, we wouldn't know. But I do appreciate him saying something that a lot of people would put their heads down to, whether you're a public figure, especially if you're a public figure, or whether you're even just like a regular person. That's not something easy to admit to. When you have substance abuse or addictions, it's hard to confront yourself, let alone people, and admit to certain things like that, because it looks very demeaning. It's very, you feel guilt and shame, and there's a lot of things that come with that. So I do appreciate his level of transparency. What I will say though is, but let's just be honest, if someone was trying to lie their way out of the conversation, they probably wouldn't openly explain what they did or what they preferred. Him saying like, hey, I was a crackhead, not a cokehead. And I'm sorry for the language, guys. I'm sorry, I apologize. It's weird even saying it, but when someone's that open, I think like, it's kind of like, just give someone a little bit of grace. They're doing their best to tell their story. Whether if it's a full story, it is what it, we wouldn't know, but everyone has a page in their book that they wouldn't want to read out loud, right? But also it's like let's just be honest, it's Washington. So it's like, I'm surprised that there was cocaine in the White House, or any kind of substance in the White House, because I'm thinking like there's Secret Service everywhere. You got to get checked down and all this other stuff, regardless of who you are, whether you're, a tourist, whether you're someone actually coming in to speak to the president, deal with political matters. That's part to me, it took me back a little bit, because I was like, I can't believe that would even happen. But for me personally, I don't want to beat on a dead horse regarding this. Either you believe him or you don't, but I do appreciate his level of transparency there. Then we're going to skip forward a little bit, right? We're going to jump around to the critical parts that I think people are going to want to like really, what I think were the highlights of this interview, basically. And then we're going to get into how this even started, like how was he even introduced to substance abuse. This next portion actually surprised me way more than I expected, honestly, because Hunter Biden starts explaining how addiction entered his life. One thing that stood out to me was that it didn't start with harder substances first. He actually started as an alcohol addict, and then later on in life, around his mid-30s, things escalated. And honestly, that shocked me, because I think most people assume, or at least I assume, that people get exposed to those kind of substances at a younger age, whether if it's like fresh out of high school, in college, I think are the common stories that you hear all the time. So to hear someone in their mid-30s that is pretty established from what he seemed to be saying, and even though he was an alcoholic, he was a functional alcoholic, I would think that he would have just been exposed to that a lot sooner. But hearing someone say that they didn't spiral into deeper addiction until adulthood was genuinely eye-opening for me. But I'm gonna let you guys hear from him first, and then we'll get into my thoughts and opinions on it.
Be honest about it. We were just talking before we started this. Is the hardest thing for any addict to do is not only get honest with the people that they love, but to get honest with themselves. And until they can really see themselves for who they are, all of it, and decide to love themselves, then the cycle is just going to continue. It's just, at least in my experience, that's the truth.
I think one of the things...
Did I even answer your question?
Yeah, well, I want to talk about the first time that you got introduced to it, because that's interesting.
Oh, I know. I went into all the good stuff.
Actually, start with that. Like, how did you actually get introduced? First off, describe for people who don't know the difference between cocaine and crack, because crack is a lot more addictive. And so just what is the difference?
I know I got a lot of heat for...
No, it was fantastic. It was fantastic. I was like, well, he's actually very educated on this. And
well, it's important to me to make the distinction that...
I'm going to just pause right there real quick. One, I'm not going to play everything that he says. Specifically, this part I am definitely going to skip over. But I just want to give you guys a general introduction of the question that Candace presented herself, which is like, what was his introduction to this substance? And I'm going to let you guys hear it, but I wanted to explain to you guys because he's about to go into this whole like a little bit of a ramble on the difference between cocaine and crack. And I'm so sorry again for using this language. But it's just something I'm very sensitive to. I wouldn't want to expose the wrong people to certain things. And when I was listening to it, I was a little bit like, this was just a little bit much for me. So I'm just kind of sharing with you guys why I'm skipping over that portion. Of course, if you want to see the whole interview in its entirety with no interruptions, do go on Candace's show. It was a fairly good interview, but do be mindful that there are sensitive things that are being talked about. So that being said, let's move forward into how he explains his introduction.
Let's start all the way at the beginning. I think that I'm genetically predisposed to be an alcoholic. I do believe that there is a genetic piece of it. I do believe that my brain works differently as an addict in terms of the way in which my synapses fire once they're introduced to the dopamine hit and the serotonin increase that occurs because of an introduction of a substance. I believe that that I became acclimated and physiologically dependent upon that when I started to drink in earnest when I was in college, in which you can control. And I made it through Georgetown, and I went to Jesuit Volunteer Corps for a year, and it's kind of like domestic peace. Well, the JVC. I was JVC for a year after college, and then I went to Yale Law School. Was married, had my oldest daughter when I was a first year law student. Made it through all of that, and made it through my first years of employment, drinking probably more than everybody than most people do, but completely functional. And one day I woke up when I was 33 years old to my brother calling me and saying, "This has got to stop. Like, you got to stop." And what he meant is that like a whole weekend was missing, kind of. And
okay, so I'm gonna pause right there. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit because he just starts to explain and a little bit of like just basically what the years look like. But you guys can hear that he's 33. The only substance issue that he has is an alcohol issue, or addiction issue that he has is with alcohol. So definitely took me off guard. Definitely, I didn't expect to hear that. I expected when he said like in college, I was like, okay, here we go. We already know the story. But no, he was actually pretty functional and pretty accomplished, and he was a functional alcoholic, and he, graduated, went to law school and all these other things. So I was surprised to hear, like I said, that this happened later on in his life. But I'm gonna let him finish up, and then I'm gonna give you my general feedback. But I wanted to stop there because he goes on a whole, I guess you can say, nostalgic moment of going through the years of him losing his brother, of being in and out of inpatient programs, outpatient rehabilitation programs, and the issue that he had with alcohol, and the years that the times that he was sober, the times that he wasn't, him having issues with his marriage, his brother passing away sadly, and then everything in between that, before he actually introduces us to what started his addiction. So with that being said, let's get into the rest of this.
And it just started a really, really dark cycle. In the past, when I would have these relapses, there was always someone in such proximity to me that they would I couldn't escape. In this instance, Bo was gone. Right after Bo died, I ended up separated from my wife within the month. And my dad, for the first time in my life, who was my rock, was stuck in his own grief, deep, deep grief.
Mm.
And I just went down into a hole. And I checked myself into a rehab that year and came out and stayed sober for a while, and then relapsed, and then went into an outpatient program in DC, where I went 4 hours every day for from 8 to 2 or 6 hours every day, stay sober. And then I relapsed, and I came back, and they said, well, you have to, I admitted to them that I relapsed, and that in this instance I also used cocaine. And they said, well, you have to take a drug test. And I said, I'm not going to take a drug test. I'm not going to put something on, it's because it's not protected by HIPAA in a rehab scenario, which is crazy, right?
Mm.
Yeah. Anyway, long story short, they said, you can't come back in unless you take the drug test. And I said, well, I'm not taking the drug test. I'm going through a divorce. And it's not protected by HIPAA. It will become public. I don't want to do this to my family. I'm telling you, I used cocaine and I drank. Is that not good enough to come back? And they said no, for whatever reason, and I'm not blaming them. This is not their fault. I walked out, and I knew Lincoln Park was a kind of open air drug market. I saw a woman that was kind of famous in the area since I had been in college, literally for 20 years, that I would see in the streets around, DC, in that area where I worked for a long time. And I went up to her and I said, can I get some crack?
Wow.
And I think it was basically, I said, can you help me commit suicide? I mean, I don't think, I know that now, in looking back, it was the coward's way. And I really mean that. I was a coward. I didn't go and just do it. I said, let me do it this way, and really, really, really drag everybody down with me along the way. Let me figure out the way not only to kill myself, but to maybe kill my dad, really hurt my family, particularly my 3 daughters, who adore me and I adore, just the fact. And I smoke crack. And the difference between crack cocaine and powder cocaine is this.
Okay, we're not going to get into that, like I mentioned to you guys before. But there's a reason why I wanted to share this. But my general thoughts, I think it's important because I think this portion was important because it reminds people that addiction doesn't care about how old you are, how successful you are, how educated you are, how wealthy you are, or what family you come from. You can still be vulnerable. And one thing he mentioned that stood out to me was how certain people can genetically or chemically be more susceptible to addiction. And I think people need to be proactive about that. Protect what you expose yourself to, your environment, your habit, your coping mechanism, your emotional health, because something we casually engage with can become something much darker later. And if you're struggling, I would highly encourage you to please get help. Seriously. Whether it's through a hospital, rehabilitation center, addiction specialist, counseling, support groups, trusted family, trusted friends, spiritual guidance, support does matter, and it will be crucial to your rehabilitation/recovery. And honestly, sometimes outside accountability can help even more than friends and family accountability, because when people know us well, too well, sometimes we become comfortable with dismissing them. But when someone's outside of your emotional circle challenges you, sometimes we tend to respond differently. So if you're struggling, build both internal support and external support. And most importantly, don't wait for your life to completely collapse before asking for help. And that's why I wanted to highlight his story a little bit, not to expose you guys to what the difference between crack cocaine and cocaine is. That's why I skipped over that basic information. But his story was so enlightening, especially for someone like me, because like I said to you guys before, I thought that this was something that you develop at a younger age, and maybe you weren't addicted to it at the time, but as life happens, maybe you become addicted to it, maybe genetically, like he said, you do it for the first time, and you just get hooked on it. So I guess in my head, I'm just like, wow, that's crazy. He did have other addictions, and it's important to address those other addictions before it goes to darker addictions, or addictions that are harder to overcome. But he was still functional. And I would think, like, because alcohol, and this is just me being naive, because alcohol is so accepted into society, that we forget that it can be a gateway. The same way how they say, like, marijuana is a gateway, any kind of substance that alters the chemicals in your brain and makes you not be yourself is a gateway. So whether if it's something as openly accepted as marijuana or alcohol, I think it's important for you to know the risk that you're taking, because it may be okay right now, but maybe not be okay long term. And for those who be like, hey, I know of my uncle or my sister or so on and so forth, or Joe Schmo down the street that's been a marijuana user, alcohol user their whole entire lives and they never flipped. Be mindful. Like he said, everyone's genetic coding is very different, and I don't think it's worth the risk. And personally, I just think that you shouldn't consume things that are meant to purposely deteriorate your body, your liver, your mind in general. Stay sharp, stay positive. There are other things that can bring you joy, and there are other things in life that can open those dopamine receptors and give you more fulfillment, like a relationship with Christ, like building a family, like exploring things that truly are purposeful and that you're passionate about. But I don't want to beat a dead horse on that one either. I think it's just really important that we understand that there are people out there struggling, and you don't have to be ashamed of what you've done. But please do not continue to go down a dark path. Ask for help. People care. And I do care for those, because like Candace said, like he said in the interview, everyone has some kind of form of connection, whether you know a friend, whether you know you're a family member, or whether you know you've experienced it yourself. Know someone who struggles with some kind of addiction. So I think it's important that we understand that we're human, give people grace, and give people a chance to recover. But also, obviously, for those people who have tried to help an addict, remember it starts with them first. And remember, if you are an addict, it starts with being honest with yourself first. So I pray for you guys out there who may be struggling. I'm hoping and wishing and praying for you guys to make a full recovery. But let's get into the next portion of the interview, which this part of the interview honestly may have been one of the most important conversations overall, because they're starting to talk about how politics have shifted culturally. It's not just disagreement anymore, but genuine hatred. And honestly, I think they're right. So before I give my thoughts and opinions on it, let's listen to what they have to say.
You know, I think about what it was that, just revisiting what made a lot of people, including myself, so angry about you. Or I guess it wasn't really about you. It was the gaslighting. It was the letter that came from people saying it was Russian propaganda. that is what is driving us crazy about the Epstein files right now. It's what's actually leading, ironically, to the collapse of the MAGA support, is we don't want to be gaslit. And to be fair, it wasn't you. That's why it was so refreshing when you were like, yes, I had a crack addiction. This is me. I did this. I was with hookers. But you weren't speaking for you. And there were literally a bunch of people that were coming out and saying, this is not real. And that is the most infuriating thing, because everyone's average. Everyone can connect with addiction. Everyone could have this conversation. Actually, if you would come out and I probably, in that environment, obviously, maybe there would have been a different result because we were at each other's throats.
No, exactly.
But that is what made people so angry. It was like, nope, he never smoked crack. It wasn't real. The laptop is Russian propaganda. We're like, guys, what is this?
Yeah, by the way, here's the problem, is that Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani saved the quote-unquote laptop, which, by the way, is bullshit. Like, if we can agree on that gaslighting, I will agree on the gaslighting of this, is that there was never a quote-unquote laptop. There was a hard drive of stolen and hacked material, wherever it came from, whether it came from a Delaware repair shop or whether it came, like Lev Parnas says, from Dmitry Firtash, who was trying to sell a hard drive of Hunter Biden's in Ukraine, that they were looking for before the laptop repair shop guy was ever the twinkle in the eye. Just go back and look at the record, okay? So here's the thing, is you're absolutely right. And and this is like the freedom of being able to say this. It's like, yeah, they should have let me go out and talk.
Yeah.
But it was 2 weeks before the campaign. And then then the election was over. Steve Bannon, it goes on and with his buddy Gao, the Chinese billionaire that's now in prison, and that is like a Chinese spy or whatever, where he got arrested on his boat and all that crap. There is go listen to it. Go listen to the recorded conversation in which they say, like, the laptop, like, we got him. We, so we collected all the salacious pictures and we put them out there. And then Rudy went out and stood on the steps of the Newcastle County Courthouse with Bernie Kirk and said, this contains child exploitation, like pure, pure bullshit, just bullshit. So on both sides, you have this reaction, which I don't think was necessarily a coordinated reaction in the sense that, what do you do in 2 weeks? And so they come up with this and they say, and I don't get to go out and say, no, I was. But you know what I did? Is that come April, I write a book and I tell everybody I was addicted to crack. And here's my story. And here's what happened. And here is all of the rooms that no one would ever want to admit to being in, that I was in. And
I'm going to pause right there real quick. I actually wanted to show that I know we were going to get into the gaslighting, which we'll get, into the politics and hatred part, which we'll get into in a second. But I wanted to address the issue with the Hunter Biden laptop, because obviously that was a big, besides him being a addict, that was another big thing that was pretty much all over the headlines, was this controversial, corrupt laptop that was going on. And I think it's pretty interesting, and he gets into like what was actually on the laptop in a second, which I'll play for you guys. But I'm happy Candace went into that, because, and kind of saying like what the issue is with politics is the gaslighting, the lies, the hypocrisy on both ends. And she obviously explains that, that's why she kind of took her hands off of it, and why people are kind of so kind of like over the whole political left-right movement, because he's explaining they're talking about right now the controversy around that time surrounding the Democrats, right? And this was right before the election happened, 2 weeks prior to the election. And we see that there's a whole propaganda to say like, this isn't real, this was a lie. And blatantly, he's admitting, no, the laptop was real. And then, and this is obviously years after his dad left office and Trump is now in office. And she's saying, that's the issue that the people are having, because whether if it's with Russian propaganda with the laptop with you, or if it's currently with the Epstein files, we're basically just being lied to. So it's hard to have trust in, the political system, in the people who govern us, and expect for us to think that they have our best interests at heart when they're blatantly lying just for the sake of trying to win an election instead of for the sake of trying to be better for the American people. And that's just my general opinion on what I'm interpreting from this. And that's how I feel personally. Like, I want a leadership that we don't have to be like, oh, who's the lesser evil? We shouldn't, I feel like that's such a low expectation that we shouldn't even uphold, that we shouldn't continue. We understand that people make mistakes. People who make themselves, people prove themselves. Yes, I think having a good, underdog story is always encouraging for those out there who need that, and those out there who are struggling, and those out there that need change. But at the same time, I think it's very important that we're mindful of who we elect in office and their current mindset and way of being, and not be susceptible to the things that they say, but actually take account into their entire, into like the things that they've done. Whether you made mistakes before in the past, how did you deal with them? Because no one has a clean rap sheet, right? We're all sinners. We all fall short from the grace of God. But there are genuinely good people out there that are qualified, that have done the work, that don't make mistakes. They're not hypercritical to the safety of our country, but let alone they also hold themselves with integrity. Their mistakes may not have been as egregious as something like this, as, trying to cover up something politically for the sake of trying to win. They move with honor. There's a lot of people out there like that, and I'm not endorsing anyone, so I won't say anyone's name, but just be mindful of the policies that someone puts forth, on their character, their home life, what they've done for society in the past few years, what they stand for, what they represent, how they intend to lead. And if they have already been in leadership positions like senator, like governor, like councilman, like congressmen, what have they done in that time? Truly, what have they done in that time? And I feel like that should determine how you vote. Not just based off of, oh, these are the two candidates that we're left with, or hey, these are the people that are being presented. Like, no, if you feel like there's someone out there that can make a difference, talk to them, convince them, advocate for them, show them that they can make a difference, especially those who may not even want to do that. You'd be surprised. I always say sometimes the people who don't want the calling are the ones who are made to take the call. I really do mean, I have seen that in my own life. I have experienced that with people. And I'm not saying that those people are perfect. Far from perfect. We are all flawed. And those people are flawed as well. They may be very verbose. They may be very confident. Maybe even a little bit, some people would say arrogant. But to say that they don't have what it takes to lead a country with honor, with dignity, and for the betterment of society overall is not true. So don't be overlooked by all these people that are quote unquote well known, but never actually contributed to society a day in their life. And that will happily lie and collude and just manipulate you out in face value, especially when you already know the truth. So that's not a shot against the current administration. That's not a shot against the past administration. It's just a wake-up call for the future. Do we still want to have leaders that don't have our best interests at heart, that hold things from us that we should know for the betterment of our future, our children, and our country? But I'm not going to beat on a dead horse again there. I think I made my point very clear. I'm going to let him finish up with this point. And then we're going to move on to the political culture shift that's going on currently.
And it was like a blip on the radar, because everybody was now fighting about whether there was kind of a suppressed story on Twitter, and whether there was this gaslighting from, and by the way, I am not here to defend any of
But then
those
it's
people.
part of like the political machine where they're like, we have 2 weeks to go to the election.
Yeah.
We're going to do this denial, because we can't afford this right now, essentially.
Yeah.
And then we're going to table this, make it past these 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then by that time, first and foremost.
By
Your
the way,
father
yeah.
won,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and so people are angry. They feel like the election's been stolen and that there was this entire collusion to cover a laptop, which if it was on the other side, they may have done too. This is what DC is. It's politics. But that is where I think the anger came from.
Yeah.
And it was just like,
I get it.
how dare you gaslight us?
Yeah.
And then people then start making you this focal point of
And it
like,
never had anything to do with me.
Right. It was kind of bigger than you at that point.
You know what the laptop proved?
That you were a crackhead.
There you go.
That you
By
were
the way,
deep in the throes of crack addiction.
all this other bullshit, bribery and all these other things that they investigated up and down during the Trump administration with a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, with the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, the only U.S. attorney in the country to stay on and continue to prosecute me, who then became special counsel after I got a plea deal because I paid my taxes late. And I paid them with penalties and interest, and I owned a gun for 11 days while they say I was addicted and check that box. That's it. Everybody has all the information. It's not like the Department of Justice has my digital footprint in every text message, every email. And there's not a single one in which you find that would in any way supports the really serious accusations of enriching himself somehow, or none of it. None of it's there. So I own whatever you want to call it. I own the laptop. Come, you know what? We can go through it together. If you're willing to avert your eyes to the tragedy of addiction. I mean, just the absolute tragedy of it.
Yeah.
But man, oh man, there is no space for that in discourse anymore. There's no space for the nuance of, well, that was addiction. That wasn't corruption.
Okay. I know I played a little bit of a lot for you guys, and do be mindful that if something is not in its entirety, it's just because I had to clip up certain things to avoid copyright strikes. But, so again, whether you believe him or not, I personally have not went down the rabbit hole or followed up with the actual investigation, as many of you may have not, with Hunter Biden. So I can't verify that what he's saying is true. I do, I guess, appreciate his level of transparency with him reiterating his addiction and the grotesque things that have come with it. And just to end on this point, at the end of the day, what saddens me as an American citizen is that why are we hiding? Why are we hiding things? Why are we making excuses for people for the sake of, just trying to win elections? That shouldn't be the way of life. And I don't believe that's what our founding fathers established this country for. I think that's the reason why they left Europe, if I'm not mistaken, because they wanted justice. And justice is truth at the end of the day. The truth, holding people accountable when they do things wrong, having the ability to reinvent yourself to do better, and having a chance for opportunity if you have proven that you wanted to. But this current issue, left, right, so on and so forth, with politics is so disheartening for someone who grew up, maybe I grew up a little bit more naive, maybe I grew up a little bit more sheltered for people, but essentially it's like, why are we protecting certain things or making excuses for certain things for the sake of, what are we gaining from it? Why are we doing that? Please someone answer this question for me. Why are we covering up certain things? Let's be transparent. Let's investigate things to its fullest extent. Because the fate of our children, the fate of our future, the fate of our country depends on it. And I strongly do believe that. But again, I don't want to beat on a dead horse. Let's skip ahead to what I mean when I'm saying the political hatred culture that has established. I'm going to let them get into it and explain it, and I'm going to give my general thoughts and opinions right after.
The Trump thing is worse because it came from his own mouth, the gaslighting. So it wasn't people trying to cover it up. It was Trump being what Epstein files? Are we still talking about the Epstein files? And so, but then things kind of changed, I think, with time also, because I was very I would just definitely say I was close with Don Jr. Traveled a lot with him through the Hunter Biden laptop scandal. We talked about it, this corruption, can't believe they denied it, all these photos coming out. And then we get whatever this, Trump family is now. And it's like, man, I think it was a historian that wrote on X exactly how I feel, which is I wish I could go back to the days where I thought like Hunter Biden's art was the most corrupt deal that was done in politics. And now we're going, okay, we stood behind Trump, we fought, we shared the photos of Hunter Biden to the extent that we could, and now we have their family engaged in so many corrupt deals, the meme coins, the taking advantage of people, and you go, okay, well, what we actually have is DC is corrupt, politics is corrupt, and I think it is kind of a unifying point, not to excuse, the gaslighting of people for 2 weeks, which made people super angry.
I'm going to pause right there really quickly because I skipped ahead and I know I didn't really explain it. So between that time before they get into the actual corruption and the political hatred shift, they pretty much talk about like the corruption with DC, his artwork that he sold for millions and millions of dollars. He kind of explains that. And then she just gives her genuine opinion on like overall the deep state and everything that goes on with it and how there's no difference between the left and the right. But I'm gonna let her continue.
But I do think it's just a different time where people are kind of going back and examining. And I feel actually terrible realizing that you were finally clean, and then it's just this humiliation ritual over and over and over again of people putting everything out there and not realizing also your kids are facing this consequence as well, which people do not think about a lot of times when they publish stories. Like I even was reticent and didn't cover the Chrissy Nome thing because the first thing that came to my mind
Do they have kids?
was their kids. Like I'm like, these are kids that are about to go to college. Like,
Me
and
too.
so, and why are they doing this? Because she's in politics, right? And so this becomes, they don't think about the children. And yeah, I mean, I think now that I have kids too, I think there's just like, wow, they don't sign up for what I do for podcasting. Kids don't like sign up for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, number one though, kids are way more resilient than you think. They're so much tougher, and I know my girls have like got their and they love me and deeply, and I can 100% accept that love now and return it with everything that I have to offer. But part of what you're describing is politics in memoriam, part of it, but something's changed, Candace. There is a meanness, a willingness to adopt very, very un-American tactics against our opponents because it become a zero-sum game. It's not just that I disagree with you. It's you need to be punished. You need to be punished for what you believe. There's this incredible show.
I'm gonna pause right there before we get into the rest of this because before I give my full thoughts on the matter. That's the cultural shift that I was referring to. Is this not just I disagree with you, but this hatred that people want to incentivize and encourage violence and punish you for your opinions. I grew up in a generation that is odd. That is very odd. And it's unfortunate. It's crazy. And the fact that obviously I think we know that Candace is more conservative. I believe Biden is more of a libertarian in his views. And the fact that they can come to a consensus that the hatred on both sides, the extremes on both sides, or just in general, anyone who is incentivizing violence or hatred or punishment for the sake of someone's POV is new. And it's not something that's ever happened before. And I know people are going to say, well, what about JFK? What about this? What about that? I feel like maybe we weren't, because of social media, we're more exposed to it. Maybe those were just the genuine things that happened and that was it. But now it's just like, it's not even just with like people in power. Now it's just like with commentators, with news reporters, with regular people nowadays. And it's scary and it's unfortunate, but I'm going to let them finish up. And then I'm going to wrap up with my genuine thoughts on specifically what they say, because I think it's critically important, because Candace gets into, like, this is not even just going to them now, it's going to people's families. But let's tune into what she has. Let's finish up with what she has.
And you're right. And now it's getting dirtier. The games people are playing are dirtier, and it is about wanting you to feel unsafe. And I think that is something that is so new.
Yeah.
When you have people posting your address, posting where you are, knowing that you have children. And I really do. And it is over perspective. Like for me, it was me changing my mind on Israel. And suddenly I'm getting the New York Post treatment, and I'm getting all of these people coming after me, and I'm going, this is my perspective. You're welcome to try to debate me on why I feel the way I feel about, which is because I have two eyes, about what's happening in Gaza. But to do these tactics where you're trying to destroy people that feels very, very new to me.
Yeah, and that let's be not let's be honest. I hate that phrase. Okay, I got it from my perspective. Is this? I know where that started, and that started when Donald Trump, from rally stages, started the "Where's Hunter?" Started yell, "Where's Hunter?" Call and response crowds, and then they printed T-shirts, and then they made hats, and then they made mugs. "Where's Hunter?" And then they showed up my door. I didn't have any security. I didn't have anybody. I can't afford that in my life, particularly at that time. And they literally showed up at my door with bullhorns and MAGA hats, and on the direct, and the way that they got there is the New York Post published on the front page, on its cover, an aerial view of my home with the address, and then in the thing said, and if you stand here at this, on this part of the street, you can see, and there are floor-to-ceiling windows, and and so they showed up.
Wow.
And Melissa was, what, 6 months pregnant at the time? She got in the car, because she was alone at the time, and sped off, and they followed her, and they ran her off the road. She panicked, and then, she got and they did it again, and they surrounded her, and that's new, man.
That is new.
And like, similar to you, is it like, before I sat down, I heard where you live, what the level of security that you have or didn't have, and what your perimeter of your property is like. How the hell do I know that? And how is that even remotely safe? Because you have people who now you basically spoke your truth, and they decided that you cannot exist. And so therefore, I don't know if it's going to happen, but for some reason, I think it's appropriate for me to say, tell you what Candace's address is, who lives there, and the level of security she has.
Tim Pool doing that was one of the most, it was so obvious what he was doing.
My dad said to me, I have to stop saying the F word.
But it was, like, seriously, that to me was like, it's a declaration of war. Like, they know I homeschool my kids, they know, and he's describing the security apparatus, and he's doing it in this rant, trying to be impassioned about the fact that I don't support Israel, or I don't support Eric, whatever his motivation was. There was zero reason that you would be describing the perimeter of my house outside of wanting someone to get harmed. And like, first of all, like, I'm not like Tucker Carlson, and I say this to people all the time. That's why I get so worried, because when Tucker gets accosted in public, he just has this like total happy warrior demeanor. I will claw someone's eyes out for my kids. Like, I am not the property to try. We will shoot you. Like, I will shoot you, and I will kill you, and I will happily go to prison before you have one opportunity to even make me. I'm not even going to think about whether you're going to hurt my kids.
You sound exactly like
that's
Melissa.
And that's me. That's just me. And,
By the way,
I've said it over and over on my podcast. I will smile in my mugshot, okay, because I did the right thing, and I have no qualms about that. So when he did that, I was like, okay, this little beanie boy, I see exactly what you're doing. The whole world sees what you're doing, and you are doing something because you want my children to get harmed. And then if something happens to them, you're going to go, well, I don't know how that happened, as I was describing the perimeter of her home and talking about what her security is, which was inaccurate.
By the way, Candace, but that's...
I'm going to pause right there, because I know there was a lot said, and I may have to clip up some things. But anyway, let's talk about it. I've said time and time again, and specifically, not time and time again, but I've addressed this in the past before, when the whole thing with, Larry Loomer and Candace Owens was going on, and, she was giving out information, she was involving her children. and her husband into certain things. It's distasteful. And what stood out to me during this conversation about families and children being dragged into political warfare was that moment that Hunter Biden was expressing his issues, right, with people showing up at his house, and Candace talking about her address becoming public despite having children at her home. Hunter Biden obviously explained a situation involving law enforcement responses and public targeting connected to old photos and past addictions, and making his home address and a view of his property available. And I genuinely think that this is new weird behavior. And this is where I genuinely also think that society has lost something like very, very important. Back then, people disagreed. People argued, people debated, but there was some level of like decorum, civility, restraint, humanity. Now it feels like they said, if you disagree with me, you deserve destruction. It's not normal, it's not healthy, and it's definitely not honorable. It's pretty much, in my view, psychopathic, honestly. Because, especially with children and family, they should never become collateral damage over political disagreements. It just cannot happen. And what scares me the most is how comfortable people have become with saying violent things online or doing distasteful things by exposing people's personal information online. And let's just be honest, they would never say or do certain things face to face. Like, let's just talk about it. And I think social media removed consequences from behavior. Because years ago, if you constantly provoked violence in real life, eventually reality would check you. Somebody would be checking you, and that would calm you down and bring you down several notches. Now people hide behind a screen and normalize extremisms, and I think we need to return to a culture where disagreement is allowed, differences are respected, conversation can happen without hatred, because diversity of thought is actually important. If every human being thought the same exact way, there would never be innovation, no uniqueness, no growth, no perspective. And honestly, some of the best conversations I've had in my life, entertaining at that, were with people I didn't fully agree with. I think that's healthy. I think that's normal. And most importantly, it's human. We're not going to agree on every single thing. Whether there's another woman right next to me, she's going to have her own views in life. Whether if it's a man right next to me and we grew up the same exact way, he's going to have his own views in life. Why? Because we're individuals. We have our own brain, our own mind, our own thoughts, our own things that we're passionate about. But one thing that just needs to come back in style is respect, decorum, civility, understanding, and humanity. Because certain things are just getting out of control. When you involve people's families, I'm fully on board with what Candace said. You come after my family, prepared to receive the biggest consequences that you can. And I don't blame her. I bet George was like, he's not involved, publicly. He's not on social media. He's like pretty private, with his, with how he carries his personal life. But I could imagine. In my view, I could see, like, I think they have security now. Maybe they didn't, maybe they don't. I didn't keep up with exactly what they said specifically with this situation. But I could see George, Oxford man, I believe he's a hunter, ready to shoot you down sniper style if you even touch the gate of their house. If they even have a gate. I don't know if they have a gate. But I could see her husband be like, listen, I'm not coming to play with you. Play with me, play with you, play with your mama if you want, play with your children if you want. Don't play with me and my family. So I respect that. And you know what? Everyone has the right to bear arms, obviously, according to, the amendment, and if, you are right with the law. So protect yourself and don't let people online get the best of you. And if you're a person out there online trolling, get your life together. Please go outside. Please make some friends. Please experience the reality of life, because I promise you, if someone were to do that to you in real life, not only would you be running, screaming with your head between your legs, you wouldn't even be able to withhold a lot of the a lot of the things that are being said to Candace, and a lot of the persecution that her family is facing. So whether you're Candace, whether you're Hunter Biden, left, right, middle, respect people's privacy, respect people's family, and stop saying crazy things online that you know you won't do in real life. And if you feel like you need to be doing it in real life, get some help, please, because it's not normal. Disagreements are fine. It's not the end of the world. Back then, people used to agree all the time. Having a debate was the fun part. But guess what? After debating, we may not agree about a certain way to dress. We may not agree about a certain way to live. We may have different religious views. But guess what? In school, after you were done, you guys were playing around like nothing. And sometimes there's some people that you go to school with, you never associated with them. You may not even be their friend. But guess what? When you went to class, maybe you had class with them and you had to do a group project, you end up realizing, oh, this person's not so bad. You know, we may have different views, but they're pretty chill. I mean, I probably wouldn't hang out with them all the time, but I can definitely see myself having a cordial conversation with them, even funny conversation with them. So let's just stop being weird, because this new culture energy of destruction just because we disagree is just so, like, to me it's played out. To me it should never existed. But without beating on a dead horse, let's get to a portion of the interview where they briefly touch on Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens and Candace's continuous push for deeper answers surrounding his death. And honestly, the more I hear people criticize her for investigating this, the less sense the criticisms make to me. In general, I think I wasn't really too fond of them in the beginning, but I'm like, you know what, people are really, it's like really new, it's really fresh, people are touchy-feely, but now it's just like certain things just don't make sense at all. So I'm gonna let them speak on it for a second, and then I'm gonna give you guys my thoughts and opinions on it. So without further ado, let's get into this.
Is to make you really afraid, not for yourself, for your 4 kids, for your family, for the people that work around you. It's like, and by the way, I'll tell you, is that I have the same approach that I think Tucker has to it, which is, and I don't know, which is basically like, I can handle, like, I can diffuse a situation, I can do it. Melissa, he will kill you.
Yeah, I'll kill you, and I'll ask questions later.
And she did exactly the same. And you know what really worries me? Is all of a sudden we're all talking about violence. Like, you're talking about violence. Violence is defense, but now you're talking about the violence. And then they kind of like go, oh, you're gaslighting us. This is bullshit. You're fine. You're really rich and you this and that. You can take care of yourself. It's like bullshit. Did you see what just happened to my best friend?
Yeah. Look, I mean, we just
what are
watched
you talking
Charlie
about?
get, and he had a full security apparatus.
Yeah.
We still don't know what happened to Charlie Kirk. There's zero interest. That's another thing that just completely, for me, was like done with Trump whatsoever. Like, I mean, there's just no way for someone who came from the inside and watched the work that Charlie did to get these people elected. Don Jr. was like a brother to Charlie, literally like a brother to him.
Yeah.
And to see the Trump brothers, to see Donald Trump himself, Kash Patel, who Charlie pushed for him to lead the FBI, had him on his podcast. JD Vance, like, you know, came out of nowhere. Charlie was like not sleeping to make that happen. And to see all of these people have zero interest in the obvious holes in the story, even if ultimately the holes get filled and there's a picture that makes sense, which I put that at 0% chance. But let's just, you know, the fact that they have zero interest and they're just accepting the narrative, like what this has done to me, and I've said this, I'm just done with politics. I'm just done with politics because I can't even begin to comprehend it. And again, that element of gaslighting that's happening here, where they're pretending that the people who are noticing that none of this is making sense are the crazy ones, and everyone else who's like, no, turn the chapter a week later, it's all solved, and this is how it went down, and none of it makes sense, but just accept this slop. It is the most infuriating thing, and it's just fully removed the scales in my eyes, and I've stopped with this left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. I'm like, this is sheer evil versus good.
By the way,
this is like sheer evil.
But by the way, for real, exactly.
Like, I'm
exactly.
Like,
it is good versus evil.
Yeah.
They have torn the mask off of this. I said to you before, is that I pray to God that by the end of this, that you think of me as a friend, because if anything ever happened to me, I want you and Melissa team up. You'd like, oh
Getting to
my
the bottom of
God.
it. It's not happening
by
to
the way,
Charlie Kirk.
And the criticism of you for asking the questions for someone who was like a brother to you, it's like, what the F are you talking about?
Yeah. That's
Like,
the
what are you talking
gaslighting.
about?
It's
And
like,
by the
how
way,
dare you
here
care?
coming from someone who you've attacked and you've politically, you've had all of your criticism, which I have no problem with, and we disagree on so many things. But I listen to you and I go, right on. Like Epstein, like you want to figure out why they don't want to let the release all the Epstein files? All you got to do is literally look at a picture of Trump standing on his stage at his inauguration and look behind him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like every single person.
He's protecting his donors without question.
I mean, it's crazy. Like,
Okay, we're gonna stop there. Let's just be real for a second, right? Let's be realistic for just a moment. If someone was your friend, if someone you traveled with, someone you spoke to regularly, someone you spent years around, suddenly just dies, and in the way that Charlie Kirk did, publicly basically assassinated, you would want answers too, especially if things around the situation felt unclear. And I think people are forgetting, something very important. Candace is reacting like a normal human being, not just a political commentator. And honestly, if someone close to me unexpectedly died and I felt, people weren't properly investigating, I'd be worse than Candace. I'd be going off. Like, I'm sorry, you guys. I'm very calm, but I'm very how can I say, I'm very relentless at the same time. Especially if it were my husband, my friend, my best friend, someone I deeply cared about. There wouldn't be any, oh, Sharon, calm down. There wouldn't be oh, try to view it from this. No, there wouldn't be any of that. There would just be me being like, what happened? I need the info. I need to know what happened. I need to find out who did this. I need to find out why this happened. And I think a lot of people are attacking her for wanting answers, and they're missing the reality of the fact that this is an emotional thing. This is a terrible thing. This is an emotional reality that is hard for anyone to deal with. Whether that was her friend, whether that was someone that she did business with, whatever the case may be, it's justifiable for her and anyone to want answers, especially those who are close to him. Now, I also think everyone online needs to stop making this whole entire thing like a tribal war, because at some point the actual search for truth just becomes overshadowed by the internet drama, and we don't get answered. It doesn't help anybody. I applaud Candace and the people out there that are close to Charlie Kirk that are trying to get answers for him. I respect her POV and I understand it, because the kind of personality I am, I would not let up until I have the answers, until I feel like justice was served. So I respect that. I really do. And that's why I said I really understand the criticism. Why are people upset with her because she wants to know the truth about who killed someone she cared about? That's normal. It's normal. And I don't even know why that's being questioned or why she's taking so much heat from it. I'm still relatively new into this space. Maybe there's something that I'm missing, but to me, justice must be served, especially in situations like that. But to close out with something a little bit softer, and Candace did close out with this too, this part of the interview transitions into faith. And I honestly think that this part hit me personally because regardless of politics, I think faith matters deeply. And there was a portion in there, I'm not going to play it for you guys because it was pretty long, that portion. But essentially, in summary, Candace asks Hunter Biden what his faith is. He reads a verse, verse was very beautiful, but essentially in layman's terms, it's saying to live right, to live like Christ, and to obviously love your neighbor as you love yourself. He goes into that deep explanation as to like what his faith actually is, him growing up Catholic, having friends in evangelical spaces, and him just doing his best and leaning on faith to overcome, and Candace encouraging him to, you know, go back to the Catholic Church and participate in confessions, and you know, he explains his relationship there. And that stood out to me because I think that that's a big portion and the most important part of this conversation. Yes, the safety of children and the political hatred culture needs to the safety of children needs to be prioritized, and the hatred political culture needs to stop. I think that just Candace's reasons for investigating the death of her friend is justifiable. And yes, I do believe that Hunter Biden's story will encourage people to get clean and do better and reinvent themselves. But I think this closing part is so important because faith truly does matter, and it will make all the difference. Me personally, I am a Christian and I can only speak from my own experiences, but I genuinely know that God is real. I had an experience several years ago with the Lord. He saved my life, like literally saved my life. And maybe one day I'll fully share with you guys a testimony. Because there was a moment in my life where I realized I can't deny God anymore. And I can't do this by myself. And it forced me to confront myself, not just my mistakes, not just my sins, not just the relationships that I had, but the person I was becoming. I was so consumed with achievement, work, climbing, productivity, success, that I forgot. And obviously, like being a false human at that and thinking I'm perfectly fine, right? But I had forgot that there was a deeper purpose to life, to my life. And ever since then, I genuinely just tried to become like softer, wiser, more grounded, more disciplined, more connected spiritually. Um, I've always tried to do my best to be teachable and to be open, but obviously grounded in faith. Not perfect, far from perfect. I'm growing each and every day. But I do encourage people to find God, build your relationship with God, because there's honestly nothing better. Not fame, not money, not politics, not validation. Nothing compares to spiritual peace. And I think a lot of people today are spiritually starving while trying to fill themselves with distractions. So regardless of your politics, regardless of your background, regardless of where you are in life, protect your spirit, protect your peace, and try to become better each day. Because that's all any of us can really do. But that's all I have for you guys today. Definitely do comment below your thoughts on the interview, your thoughts on addiction. If you struggle with addiction, if you know someone, do encourage them to find God, to build a relationship with God, because I promise you, He's gonna be the person to help you through it. And then also drop a comment like on the political culture you think is going on now. I think it's really distasteful, and it's unfortunate that people are seeking out destruction instead of trying to find a way to push humanity, to push us forward. Also comment below about your faith or anything else or any other topics that we discussed in today's video. I genuinely do want to hear perspectives, but do remember that we drop content every Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications, do like the video, and I'll see you guys in my next video. So bye.